Hello and welcome to the HealthTech Marketing Show. This is the show where we tackle some of the most pressing issues facing healthcare technology marketers. I'm your host, Adam Chirinas, the CEO and founder of Health Launchpad. Health Launchpad is an agency that focuses exclusively on helping healthcare technology marketing companies increase pipeline growth. So thank you to you for listening or watching today's show. If this is your first show, why don't you subscribe? If you're watching on YouTube, click the subscribe button. If you're listening to this episode on Spotify, podcast, whatever your favorite podcast app is, click the subscribe or follow button so that you get all of the episodes. I also want to give a big thank you to our long-standing sponsors and friends at the Amazing Hymns. So thank you to you guys for all of your support. In today's episode, we're going to be diving into one of the issues that we constantly hear is a big challenge for all healthcare technology marketers. And that is, how do you accelerate and optimize your marketing pipeline? So what are the things that you can do to increase the likelihood that deals are going to convert? What are the metrics that really matter to measure performance? And things like who should own pipeline generation across the organization and how should they work together? So to answer these questions, we've brought together two superb, highly experienced healthcare technology marketing leaders, Amy Swanson and Michael Passanante. These are two marketers for whom this issue is a real passion. And I've been really impressed with some of the things that they've shared with me. And I think you're going to learn a lot. So they're going to share some insights on things like how do you create collaborative dashboards that align sales and marketing? How do you identify and engage key members of the buying group? And then what can marketing do to improve sales velocity? So we're going to cover a lot of these issues, and you're going to discover things like, for example, why marketing influence deals actually can close at a higher rate and even result in larger deal sizes. So if this is an issue that you're struggling with and you're looking for some new ideas, you're going to learn a lot over the next 30 minutes. And today's episode is actually going to be hosted by my great friend and colleague, Health Launchpad's Chief Strategy Officer, Mark Erwich. So over to Mark, Amy, and Michael.
So excited to be here, and thank you, Adam, for that great introduction. Amy and Michael, we talked over the last few weeks about pipeline. And I'm so excited to talk about it today because it gets even more attention in times of economic uncertainty. And so right now, in many organizations, the executives are looking at pipeline. They're looking at pipeline creation. Are we having the right goals? Do we need to reset? How are we tracking? And what's the ownership? Like, there's a lot more pushing in organizations, in marketing, sales, and sometimes even customer experience on how to get towards the goal. So really looking forward to talk about that today. And let's start with the questions. I think Amy, you talk about the pipeline goals and getting them towards your team. Can you share with us a little bit on how do you make sure that your team is aware, and how do you then make sure also that they track on these goals and the metrics, and it becomes an important part of their thinking when they're doing their day-to-day job?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. I think, first and foremost, pipeline is a shared responsibility. So understanding the goals, the company vision and the strategy, and really making sure that the team is aligned to those goals is super important. I always like to say the why behind the goals is actually more important than the goals themselves. So really understanding not only why we're doing these things and then how we're going to achieve those things is super important. I think first and foremost, integrating the pipeline goals into the strategic planning process is really key, and having the team be a part of that, collaborating to really understand what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to get there, and then what piece each of the people owns within that process. I think also giving insight into how you essentially reverse engineer to the goal. So you can't just start with the goal. You have to really understand the component parts of that goal, what you're going to do to achieve those things, and then who again is responsible for those. And it's really critical to have that ongoing dialogue to ensure that that's a key part of every planning meeting, as well as every stand up, every one-on-one, every discussion, so that it's just an ongoing built-in part of the process. And through those regular touch points, you can really not only ensure that people understand the goal, and especially if any of those goals happen to change, but then really understand any obstacles or challenges to achieving those goals.
Thank you, Amy. Michael, you mentioned that the deals, the opportunities with marketing influence, you've recognized that those are closing at a higher rate. Can you share a little bit more about how do you measure that, and how do you actually qualify that this is happening?
Absolutely. So, we spent quite a bit of time wiring up our tech stack to ensure that we are able to track engagement at the contact level and then subsequently rolled to the account level. So we have a good understanding of the folks that are involved in the buying committee, and how they're involved in the individual opportunities, and how well we're doing getting to those people, getting them engaged prior to them even becoming an opportunity, and then helping walk them through to the end. And that's everything that we can track, right? So it could be emails, webinar engagement, could be social media engagement, could be engagement with our sales enablement offerings and collateral. And we're looking to continue to build that momentum right through the process. And so, what we see and what we measure as part of our overall KPI look is, here are the deals where marketing has shown some clear influence, where those buying committee members have been engaged. We can very easily, look at the flip side of that and see which ones are not touching or getting involved in anything that marketing's producing, and very easily then correlate, how well are they closing, if they're in one or the other bucket. And as you mentioned, it's pretty easy to tell that when they're involved in our story, that they tend to close at a higher rate.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Amy, you talked about a scorecard. I think you even said it's a collaborative scorecard where you have multiple departments working together. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, many years ago, I created what I originally called the marketing scorecard, and it became really clear that it couldn't just be a marketing scorecard. Because so many different departments are involved in pipeline generation and in growth for the company, it really became a collaboration and a collaborative effort between marketing, sales, business development teams, and now also customer success teams. So, the way I went about that was, one, really have to understand the purpose of that scorecard. For me, it's a really powerful tool, as I mentioned, to align all those teams and to drive growth. That scorecard should be a key tool in generating not only metrics, but also insights, which are actually more important and drive better decision making throughout, and performance throughout the process. So, it's really important to gain buy-in when you develop a new tool. I recommend getting those key stakeholders, those teams together very early, and really understanding the definitions behind what you're trying to accomplish. I find that fosters a sense of ownership. It helps define the benefits not only to my department and my team, but also across the various departments. And really it helps people understand, again, how we're going to achieve those goals. And once you have those common definitions in that terminology, you can then get into the metrics that go behind those terms. And I've found, in different companies, different teams, those definitions can vary. So again, just getting that common dialogue is really important. Once you align on those overall goals, then you can start to map out and design what that scorecard looks like. And I've found that many times you start with 3 or 4 metrics, and then over time you can iterate that and add the things that are critical to not only the long-term success of the company and achievement of those goals, but also things that might be future KPIs that you just simply don't have today and you'd like to work toward. I find that many leaders see that there's real value in that. It shows that you're not only focused on the short term, but also on the longer term. And then once you have the metrics and the definitions, then you can really talk about the reporting and the cadence of that reporting. And I find that that story that you're trying to tell, especially at a leadership level, is really critical to be aligned on. So that, how you're going to share and visualize the metrics as well as the insights that you're gleaning from those metrics can be really important. And it can take the form of dashboards, can take the form of, presentations, etc. But you just need to make sure that you have that transparency across the teams and that understanding at a leadership level. And I will say at a leadership level, it's absolutely critical in my experience to have that buy-in so that they can then champion what you're reporting on, and then also how that impacts performance. I would say it needs to be part of regularly scheduled touch points, as we discussed earlier, and it really needs to, if possible, fit into existing structures. So whether that's reporting structures, existing systems or software, applications that you use, different processes, even onboarding and performance reviews. That avoids creating additional administrative burden and also helps people to really buy into that process. A couple last thoughts, Mark, some helpful reminders. This scorecard is never going to be complete. It's iterative. So as you develop new goals and objectives, you want to keep that in mind. Again, that senior leadership component is really key. When they understand what you're measuring, why you're doing that, and what that actually means for the success of the company, they're very likely to be advocates and to champion for that metric or that scorecard. And then lastly, use it as a tool to recognize and celebrate the team. You're going to have accomplishments that you want to really recognize, but it's also a great way to track progress. So that's how I've gone about it, and I'm sure there are a million different ways to do it, but that's what's worked for me.
Thank you so much, Amy. Really exciting approach, collaborative approach, and it also sets you up as a leader, but brings all people together when you present it upstream. So great approach there. Thank you so much for sharing that. Michael, you just mentioned this concept of the buying committee. And I think will be interesting, and particularly in light of building pipeline. At what point did you start tracking that, and how is your organization continuously looking that they have the right people in the buying committee and that they're marketing out towards the right individuals there?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I think we identified very early on in our process. Like most B2B situations, it's not one person that weighs in on the decision, right? There's many. So getting to understand the personas that were involved and how each of them plays into that decision became very important for us. And so early on, we wanted to make sure that as we developed our target accounts and started to think about ABM more holistically, that we were doing our due diligence to augment those target account records with the right people. And you source them from a variety of different places, but the point being that you get them centered in there, and that you really can start to understand that level of engagement across those accounts very early on. And again, the flip side of that, who's not lighting up, how are we not touching them? And so we look at that and we talk about that frequently. We have several hundred deals typically in our pipeline at any given time. But it's very easy to see, here's the ones that we are influencing. Here's the ones that we're not. If we haven't to that point, let's see if we can help it along, right? Why haven't we done that? What can we be doing? So you're using it as a diagnostic tool as well as a measurement tool in trying to understand where we're going. Because as you mentioned before, we know when they're engaged in our story, and we know when we have more people involved, no surprise in that decision, they're more likely to tip in our favor. And so it's not just, sort of a one point in time thing. It's looking at that longitudinally and trying to make sure that you're staying consistently engaged with those accounts.
Great. Thank you. Amy, we were talking about the role of BDRs in building pipeline and how they fit in towards what marketing is doing and what sales is doing. Maybe start by giving us a perspective of your view of the role of BDRs in this whole pipeline generation. And then secondly, maybe you can weave in there, based on that role, where would they fit best in the organization?
Yeah, great question, Mark. I think, for BDRs, I find that the best definition, or at least the most consistent definition, is a team or a person who are really focused on inbound. They are the final step, if you will, between marketing and sales, and really decide whether or not a lead is, quote unquote, qualified and moves forward in the process. Based on that definition, and I've found in my experience, BDRs really, there's something I call the Ron Weasley syndrome, which is that a lot of teams don't really understand the role of that character in the overall team. And so just like Ron Weasley, if you're familiar with the Harry Potter series, I think he struggled to be anything but Harry's best friend throughout the series, and really, had a difficult time understanding his role in the greater team and the greater storyline. So those BDRs really need to have role clarity, and they can't suffer from that Ron Weasley syndrome, so that they know where they fit in the organization best and what they contribute to the overall team goals. I will say that I think when BDRs report to sales, that structure can work, but they are primarily incentivized on quotas and short-term activities, which makes sense, right? Because that's what sales is focused on. But that doesn't necessarily serve all the different purposes that marketing serves and the value that it drives within the organization. So in my experience, I've found, especially for companies who are more focused on the overall patient or customer journey, that BDRs reporting in through the marketing organization is actually a better fit. It prevents Ron Weasley syndrome, but it also helps to nurture prospects on the front end directly into the early stages of the buyer's journey. It helps with messaging early on so that those prospects, when they become customers, are already accustomed to those on-brand messages and content. And then on the back end, if the focus is on upsells and cross-sells, it really helps with that continuity of message, but also that continuity of experience. And so for me, a BDR focused on not only inbound, but also on that overall customer journey, fitting that role into the marketing group tends to make more sense than it's sitting in sales.
Great, thank you. Michael, you have a BDR team?
We do. Right now it's a team of one. We're probably going to be expanding that, but yeah, I would be inclined to agree with Amy on that. I mean, when we think about our approach, and right now the BDR is in the marketing team, there's so much work that's done upstream. Yep. That, and there's only so many accounts that are in market at any given time anyway, right? So the chance of him finding a bullseye or several bullseyes any day and creating a short-term opportunity out of that, it's kind of small. But what we have seen is over the time he's been doing this, that evolution where that early engagement layered on with other kinds of targeting and surrounding those people before they become opportunities makes a difference. We see people that he's frequently engaged with through LinkedIn or other types of venues, meeting them at conferences, etc. And then all of a sudden, an opportunity shows up in our pipeline. Usually because we're again sort of disambiguated. We have a broker consultant between us and the end client, but so they don't necessarily call him back and say, "Hey, I want to get on the phone with you." But we, that constant engagement and movement kind of creates that familiarity and pushes it along, no doubt. And so we're seeing more and more accounts showing up in our pipeline that he had engagement with long before they became opportunities, right? So again, correlate it, but to me, that's making a difference where we didn't see that before him being there.
Okay, thank you. Let's stay with you, Michael. What advice would you give marketing leaders who want to get better alignment across the different teams on the pipeline metrics?
Yeah, I mean, the the first thing you need to do, I think, is make sure that your team understands that they have responsibility for pipeline, right? That it's, the activities of marketing are not divorced from the creation and the cultivation of pipeline. So they need to understand what the sales goals are. They need to understand, as Amy intimated, what the pipeline goals are, because they're going to be bigger than the sales goals, right? And what it takes to get there, and what their role is in that, right? So those are hugely important. And then I think you need to understand how marketing plays into that and how your leadership views that, right? There's going to be certain situations, depending on the product that you have, where marketing is going to be very directly involved in specific discrete opportunity creation, right? We call those marketing attributed leads, right? Or marketing attributed business. And then there's going to be another end of the spectrum where marketing is a really more influential player in a very long tail, complex sale, perhaps. That's where I tend to find myself, right? And so as we calibrated our KPIs, it wasn't about, how many opportunities can I create in the next 15 to 30 days, right? Because it takes, months, maybe years to have something actually show up. And so we had to calibrate how we approach the market and what we measure and what marketing is ultimately responsible for, to that thinking. And that I think helps get the teams aligned around what they can reasonably expect the marketing team to do in the course of those sales.
Great, thank you. Amy, when Michael brought up this concept of translating the pipeline goals towards marketing metrics, what's your point of view on that?
No, Michael's exactly right. You have to have alignment and also common language. And I found, especially when translating marketing KPIs to executive leadership, I need to really stay away from and have my teams stay away from what would be traditionally considered marketing jargon. A lot of times, marketing will come in and say, hey, we generated X number of MQLs this month. And the leadership team may have varying experience with MQLs or leads in general. And so I really try to focus more on business impact and say things more akin to, the X number of leads that we generated this month represent a total potential pipeline value of X in dollars. And based on historical conversion rates, this contributes to our monthly revenue targets in this way. This helps them to really kind of translate what we're doing, the activities that we're doing, and not really be so transactional, but think more in terms of value proposition. When marketing can drive value and the executive leadership can understand that, and frankly, the whole team can understand that, I think it just goes a long way in making sure, again, as Michael said, that everyone's on the same page and that we have a common, set of terminology that we can use to define what we're doing.
Great, thank you. Michael, as you look towards the different stages in pipeline, you had mentioned a number of different tools that your team is using across the pipeline and even at earlier stages. Can you share with us how those tools are helping and maybe even how that's improving sales velocity and some other measurable metrics?
Yeah, sure. I mean, velocity is an interesting question in our space because, there is sort of a cadence to the way people buy their benefits. So it can be difficult to say, wow, we did this with them, or they engaged in that, and that increased, or reduced the amount of time by 10 or 20 days. It's not quite that discrete, but again, back to the overall idea of engagement. For instance, we have a CMS platform called Paperflight that we use, and that enables the sales team to both share individual pieces of collateral from that and track the movement and touch points of that collateral, in addition to creating what are essentially deal rooms where they can exchange information with clients and across their buying committee, right? What we see is tangible impact on that, right? We see once those assets begin to get shared, they also begin to get consumed, right? And they get consumed over and over through the course of the process. And I believe something that seems relatively simple like that makes a difference in the course of a deal where they're definitely going to be evaluating different vendors. And, we're not the ones that are throwing PDF files over the wall at them, right? They're in an experience, and they're engaging with our team and across their team at the customer site in a very specific way, and it's customized and to their look and their brand, and it just tells them that we're more engaged with them as a company because our sales take a little while to close. So those kinds of things have certainly benefited us, I think, in the course of a deal, and help to create a differentiated experience that they aren't typically going to get from competitors in our space.
Great, thank you. Exciting how the technology is helping in that perspective. We were all talking about different influences between marketing and sales. Also, I think as we see more and more customer experience and your existing customers. So, Amy, would love to get your perspective on that and how they become part of the conversation. Not only of like their number gets in there, but like what's the collaboration between marketing and customer experience, and what have you done in that space?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I am seeing a growing importance of marketing in customer retention and customer retention goals. The old adage is it costs less to keep a customer than to create a new one. And it's a real balance, right, between marketing, which is already a small but mighty team in many cases, focused on acquisition and, leads and things of that nature, and then retention. So, I would say the balance between, where you focus your energy as a marketing team really depends on your company goals. In general, I tend to focus marketing investments on driving the most profitable long-term customer relationship. So whether you're measuring that in customer acquisition cost, customer lifetime value, whatever those metrics are, you really need to speak the language of your leadership team and really focus in your energy and your resources where it makes the most sense for the overall health of the company, both from a growth but also a profitability standpoint.
Great, thank you. Michael, any different perspective?
I think Amy nailed it. I mean, it's really, that's the key is calibrating your campaigns and your approach to making sure that you're aligned with the company goals. And that does tend to, revolve around both sales and profitability, right? So that's, that's the key. And making sure that your team is and your activities are aligned to that. It's very easy to stray. There's so many, shiny objects in marketing. And, we all know, those of us that are practitioners of it, there are lots of opinions that come in from lots of different places about what you could and should do. Right. And so that's where you need to have these KPIs at your side and alignment, because that helps insulate you from some of that chatter that can take you off point. Because you can make that argument that you're trying to stay the course, and here's how you need to do it, and that really will help in those situations. I've found that to be extremely beneficial.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I think that the thinking of involving customer experience and retention is definitely something you see more and more over the last 5 years or so. I think the other part, which is getting more and more, is the shift of marketing's focus towards bringing more in towards the pipeline, now to taking a look towards the opportunities that are in pipeline and where can marketing help? How can we accelerate? So interested in that and in both of your opinions. Maybe, Michael, we start with you.
Sure. I mean, certainly, we're in a company that's not quite 7 years and change in market, right? So we're at that arc now where retention's becoming a thing. It's not all, new acquisitions is obviously always key, but retention's becoming a thing. And so as our account managers are getting deeper and deeper in that mode, frankly, there's a great synergy there between what marketing and our customer success / account management teams can do, and how we all row together to keep those clients happy, to keep them informed, and keep them in our camp. So absolute agreement and alignment there that there needs to be some time spent making sure that happens. The other side of it is, that sort of, new acquisition and engagement, and that never really goes away. Right. So you have to balance that between what you're doing on the retention side and how you're pursuing that new engagement.
Good. Amy, perspective on the opportunities that are in pipeline and how to accelerate those, how to make sure that they keep on moving.
Yeah, I mean, I think Michael raised a good point that the lead generation activities never go away, right? But what I try to tell my teams is, one, they never go away, but we also need to be smarter about what we're pushing into the pipeline so that we're spending our energy where it makes the most sense. So kind of related back to the earlier question. The other is that, it seems like sales cycles are getting longer. I think Michael alluded to this as well. And so there's, perceived time, I'll call it, that marketing teams have to devote to other activities. And so, we definitely want to show value across the continuum, both pre and post sale. And so as we look at, what it takes to retain a customer and also what it costs us to acquire a new customer, if you look at that, the math, the calculus is such that in many cases, it actually is more important to retain the customers than to push pipeline. And so one of the ways that we think about that is, if we can actually develop fewer leads by retention of one customer or 10 customers or, whatever it might be, or through different activities, growth activities, such as, upsell, cross-sell activities, that might actually be a better use of our scant marketing resources. And drive more value overall for the company. So again, as Michael said, you're just constantly looking at what levers can you pull and what makes the most sense for the company's goals and objectives.
Great. Well, thank you, Amy, and thank you, Michael. I think we learned a lot today, and both of your perspective, most of the time aligned, but sometimes coming in towards it from a very different angle, super valuable. Maybe we close with some final thoughts and a recommendation for marketing leaders. If you want to drive pipeline, what are the critical points that you would recommend our marketing leaders pay close attention towards? Michael, let's start with you.
Pipeline doesn't start with an outbound email that someone responds to most of the time. If you talk about demand generation or demand creation, that's where you get into this whole, brand building conversation. And it's really important to balance your performance marketing with your brand, because, and that can be tough depending on your leadership and how they view that. But again, when you've got just a select number of buyers that are in market at that moment, you obviously want to capture that demand, but that demand starts way upstream. And so when you're thinking about how to allocate your resources, you want to make sure that you're engaging the marketplace where they are. And that may not always be in a buying mode, but if you're building pipeline, and that's, again, you can't get yourself into this mode that pipeline is a narrow window. It starts way in advance. And so I would suggest that you definitely spend time on building out the content and building out the muscle to make sure that you can engage those buyers and build that brand presence. So when they are ready to go, you're top of mind for them. And then that conversation becomes so much easier. The demand capture becomes so much easier, and the conversion pathway is much more straightforward as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's like, if you're not building the brand, you're not even in consideration when they start reaching out. So great point, Michael. Amy, any recommendations you have for marketing leaders?
Yeah, I'll build on what Michael said. I mean, in B2B especially, only 5% of the market is in market at any given time. So if you think about it in that way, and again, marketing has a real story to tell in terms of brand, but also leadership is reluctant and reticent sometimes to devote money and energy to brand activities. But brand is really actually more important and demand than actual lead generation in many cases. So, one, make sure that you're not sort of, don't look at the tree rather than the forest in this sense. Focus on both. Two, that alignment to goals is really critical, and having metrics, as we discussed, as well as a way to convey and communicate those metrics is really key. And make sure that there is a common language, because as everyone is involved in demand generation and brand, they're also involved in pipeline generation. And so having everyone be on the same page and having regular communication about where you are, how you're going to get there, and what barriers or challenges you're having, I think is really key to just having success in both lead and demand generation.
Great. Well, Amy and Michael, thank you so much. This has been not only a pleasure, but also a great learning experience. And I think for everybody, it was something to learn here today. So thank you for a great talk today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
That was great. I'm actually going to end the recording because I think what I'm going to do is, wow. Well, I learned a lot from that. I'm so grateful to them for sharing their perspectives and their insights. There's a lot to unpick in there. And so what we've actually done is turned that interview into a blog post. So the blog post does a couple of things. It summarizes the problems, but it also gives you a series of very actionable best practices. So there's a link down in the show notes. Click on that link, and you can start putting some of these things into action immediately. The other thing is a bonus in there for you. Amy mentioned that she's created kind of an interesting way of doing dashboards that are very collaborative. And so she's provided us with that framework. So if you click in the blog, if you go into the blog post, you'll see that you can download that. So I hope you enjoyed it. By the way, if you're if you're looking for help in this matter, you can give me a call. So reach out to me. So best way to reach me is at adam@healthlaunchpad.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn. And Mark and I can sit down with you and talk about some of the pipeline challenges that you have, and help provide you with some ideas. It's not a sales meeting per se. It's just an opportunity to see if we can be of value to health tech marketers who are looking for ways to improve the way you grow your pipeline. So with that, I will bid you farewell and hope to see you on the next episode.